Welcome. This is your HazMat General Awareness Training Program. In this training, we will cover a broad overview of the regulations and purpose of the DOT HazMat requirements. And while this training provides more general knowledge of the HazMat regulations, your job or position may require additional training covering more detailed information on the components of HazMat. During this HazMat General Overview training, we will discuss the purpose of the HazMat regulations, who's subject to the HazMat regulations, some of the HazMat definitions, the hazardous material table, hazard classes and divisions, shipping papers, marking and labeling, placarding, emergency response overview, security awareness, loading and unloading, and highway transportation. But let's first look at the purpose of the HazMat regulations. Movement of hazardous materials is regulated by the U.S. Department of Transportation's Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. The PHMSA ensures the safe, secure, reliable handling and transport of all hazardous materials to industry and consumers through pipeline transportation systems and shipments by land, sea, and air. Federal regulations require companies to train all employees working with such materials. Without proper training and certification, employees may not perform any function relating to hazardous materials. So who is subject to the HazMat regulations? Well, if you load or unload, pack or handle hazardous material, prepare hazardous material for transport, manufacture, test, recondition, or mark shipping containers for HazMat, provide hazard and other information for shipping papers, prepare shipping papers, certification, hazardous waste manifests or other docs, or operate a vehicle used for HazMat, in other words, the jobs you might see here, then you are subject to the DOT HazMat regulations. Let's now look at some of the HazMat training requirements. Training must be provided to all existing HazMat employees as well as new employees. New employees must be trained within 90 days of hire. Existing employees that change to a HazMat position must be trained within 90 days of the change. Any new or transferred employees may perform their new job function during the 90-day training period, provided they are under supervision of a properly trained and certified HazMat employee. For recurrent training, all HazMat employees must receive training for their job responsibilities at least once every 3 years. And training from a previous employer or other source may be used to meet the requirements of the regulations if it relates to the employee's current job function. A current record of such training must be obtained from the previous employer or other training source. There are several different levels of HazMat training, all designed to focus on an individual's job demands. General awareness, which we're doing here, gives a general knowledge of the regulations. Employees should be able to recognize and identify HazMat in the workplace. All HazMat employees must receive this training. Function-specific training teaches necessary regulations, knowledge, and skills for an individual's job function. Safety training should address appropriate personal protective measures, how to use emergency response information, methods and procedures for avoiding accidents, and any remedial actions required after release of a hazardous material. And finally, modal-specific training is intended to provide for the safe operation and handling of hazardous materials for a specific mode of transportation. So why comply with the HazMat training requirements? Well, most HazMat incidents are the result of human error. Proper training has been shown to decrease the human error factor, including helping prevent improper shipping labels and improper packaging. Failure to comply can result in civil and criminal penalties. And any person who knowingly violates a requirement of the Federal Hazardous Material Transportation Law is liable for a civil penalty of not more than $27,500 and not less than $250 for each violation. Let's now look at some of the more important HazMat definitions. A hazardous material is defined as a substance or material which has been determined to be capable of posing an unreasonable risk to health, safety, and property when transported in commerce. A material is considered hazardous if it meets one or more of the hazard class definitions, and is a hazardous substance, hazardous waste, marine pollutant, or elevated temperature material. Hazardous materials table is found in the 49 CFR Part 172.101. The hazardous materials table designates the materials listed therein as hazardous materials for the purpose of transportation of those materials. A hazardous substance is defined by the EPA as a substance capable of causing damage to the environment when released in certain quantities. Such a release triggers a requirement to report to the National Response Center, or NRC. Proper shipping name is the name of the hazardous material shown in the Roman print in the 172.101 HazMat table. Packing group is a grouping according to the degree of danger presented by the hazardous material. Packing group 1 indicates great danger, group 2 a medium danger, and group 3 a minor danger. Hazardous waste is any material that is subject to the hazardous waste manifest requirements of the EPA found in the 40 CFR Part 262. The HazMat table designates hazardous materials for the purpose of transportation. It also classifies each material and specifies requirements pertaining to its packaging, labeling, and transportation. HazCom consists of documentation and identification of packaging in vehicles. The information can be communicated through shipping papers, package labeling, package marking, and vehicle placarding. Let's now look at each column of the HazMat table and the importance of each. Column 1 is for symbols. A plus sign means it fixes the proper shipping name, hazard class, and packing group without regard to whether the materials meet the definition of that class or packing group or meets any other hazard class. A restricts the requirements to materials that are being transported by air. D identifies proper shipping name of materials being transported domestically. A G identifies proper shipping names for which one or more technical names of the materials must be entered in parentheses. I identifies proper shipping names which are appropriate for international transport. And W restricts the requirements to materials being transported by vessel. Column 2, you'll find the proper shipping name. The proper shipping name is listed in Roman type in the HazMat table, and any names listed in italics are not part of the shipping name. The technical name is required on the shipping paper if the proper shipping name is preceded by the letter G in column 1. In column 3, you'll find the hazard class. A hazard class is a group of hazardous materials that share dangerous characteristics, and there are 9 hazard classes. In column 4, you'll find the identification number. This is the 4-digit ID number for the material required on shipping papers, non-bulk packages, and bulk containers for HazMat transport. This lets emergency response personnel know what the material is, preceded by a UN or NA marking. Column 5 is the packing group. This indicates the degree of danger presented by the material and the packaging specifications required. Remember, packing group 1 represents a great danger, group 2 a medium danger, and group 3, like diesel, a minor danger. In column 6, you'll find the hazard label codes. The warning labels are required to be applied to each package of the hazardous material unless accepted. If there are 2 label codes listed, the primary is listed first. Column 7, you'll find the special provision codes. These special provisions are applicable to packaging, packaging requirements, certification, and marking or labeling for a hazardous material, in addition to the standard packaging requirements. Column 8 is for packaging requirements, for non-bulk and bulk quantities. For example, if the exceptions column in 8A indicates the number 150 for a particular material, 49 CFR 173.150 would be referenced. To find out if a hazardous material is also categorized as a hazardous substance, we would refer to the Appendix A at the 172.101, which is a list of hazardous substances and reportable quantities, or RQs. When shipping a hazardous substance at or above the reportable quantity, the letters RQ must be included on the shipping paper immediately before or after the basic shipping description, or in the HM column. This applies to a single container, not the aggregate quantity. Hazardous materials are placed within one of 9 hazard classes based on their chemical and physical properties. Certain characteristics cause a material to be hazardous to life, the environment, or both, while some materials will have characteristics of more than one hazard class. The hazard class is among the most important information items to those who need to deal with hazmat accidents. Let's look at a few of the hazard classes here. Hazard Class 1 are for explosives. These materials are divided into 6 divisions, with Division 1.1 being the most dangerous and 1.6 being the least dangerous. Hazard Class 2 is for gases, with 3 divisions beneath that. 2.1 for flammable gas, 2.2 for non-flammable, and 2.3 for poison gases. Hazard Class 3 is for flammable liquids and combustible liquids. Flammable liquids are a liquid having a flash point no higher than 141 degrees Fahrenheit, while combustible liquids are a liquid that doesn't meet the definition of any other hazard class and has a flash point above 141 degrees but below 200. Hazard Class 4 is for flammable solids, with the 3 divisions beneath it. Hazard Class 5 are for oxidizers and organic peroxides. These provide excess oxygen during a fire and increase the severity of the fire or can even cause an explosion. Hazard Class 6 is for poisonous and etiologic infectious materials, with the 2 divisions beneath that. Hazard Class 7 is for radioactive materials, which is any material or combination of materials that spontaneously gives off ionizing radiation. Hazard Class 8 is a corrosive, a material, liquid, or solid that causes visible destruction to human skin, or a liquid that has a severe corrosion rate on steel or aluminum. And finally, Hazard Class 9 is for miscellaneous, a material which presents a hazard during transport but which is not included in any other hazard class. Let's now look at shipping papers. The requirements for shipping papers are found in the 49 CFR 172.200. A shipping paper is a document which accompanies a shipment and provides specific hazmat information required by the DOT. Shipping orders, bills of lading, and hazardous waste manifests are all examples of shipping papers. The hazmat table provides the required information needed to complete a shipping paper. The general entry requirements for shipping papers is found in the 172.201. The DOT does not require a standard form for shipping papers, but does specify the way the information must appear on the shipping paper. When a description of a hazardous material is required to be included, that description must conform to the following. The shipping description must be legible and printed in English. Additional information concerning the material may be provided so long as it's not inconsistent with the required description. And it may consist of more than one page if each page is consecutively numbered and the total number of pages is included on the first page. An emergency response number is required on shipping papers. A shipping paper must contain an emergency response telephone number that is monitored 24 hours a day by a knowledgeable person while the shipment is in transport. So what is required to be on shipping papers? Well, the proper shipping name, which is found in column 2, the hazard class or division from column 3, the identification number from column 4, the packing group from column 5, and except for empty packagings, cylinders for class 2 materials, and bulk packagings, the total quantity of the hazardous material must be shown. Some additional description requirements would include limited quantities, wherein the words limited quantity would be required to be shown. Hazardous substances, if a quantity of a hazmat listed in Appendix A meet or exceed the reportable quantity, the letter RQ will be entered. And empty packagings. Packages containing hazmat residue may include the words residue last contained with the basic description of the material last contained in the package. Enforceable on January 1, 2013, shipping papers must meet the new international regulations. For instance, the old way would say diesel fuel 3 NA 1993, packing group 3. The new international way would read NA 1993, 3, packing group 3, diesel fuel. Under shipper certification, anyone offering a hazardous material for transport shall certify that the material is offered for transport in accordance with 49 CFR and must include the following language. This is to certify that the above named materials are properly classified, described, packaged, marked, and labeled,
and are in proper condition for transportation according to the applicable regulations of the DOT. Some exceptions are in a cargo tank supplied by the carrier, and for the return of an empty tank car which previously contained a hazardous material and has not been cleaned or purged. For additional certification requirements, you can refer to the 172, 204, and 205 regulations shown here. For shipping papers accessibility, when the driver is at the controls, the papers must be within arm's reach while restrained by the lap belt, and either readily visible to a person entering the driver's compartment or in a holder on the driver's side doorway. When not at the controls, the papers must be again in a holder on the driver's side door or on the driver's seat. Bulk packaging is a transport vehicle, tank truck, intermodal tank, or freight container in which HazMat is loaded with no intermediate form of containment, and which has a maximum capacity of greater than 119 gallons for liquids, for a solid, a maximum net weight greater than 882 pounds, and a capacity greater than 119 gallons. All bulk containers must be marked with UN or NA ID number, even if placards are not required. General marking requirements says that no person may offer for transportation or transport a hazardous material in a bulk packaging unless the packaging is marked as required with the identification number specified in the HazMat table. Each bulk packaging marked with a proper shipping name, common name or ID number must remain marked when emptied unless it is cleaned of residue and purged of vapors to remove any potential hazard, or refilled with a material requiring different markings or no markings so that any residue remaining is no longer hazardous. Markings and labelings are an important part in identifying hazardous material. Markings are different from labels, even though they may be applied to packages like labels. Labels relate the hazard class or division of the material contained in the package, found in column 6 of the HazMat table. Markings give additional information about the hazardous material in the package to help communicate the hazards. They must be durable, printed in English, and printed on or affixed to the surface of a package or on a label, tag, or sign. Be displayed on a background of sharply contrasting color, unobscured by labels or attachments, and be located at least 3 inches away from any other marking that could reduce its effectiveness. For labels, when 2 or more hazards are packaged, you must have a label for each hazard. However, only the hazard class for the primary hazard must be listed. Like markings and labelings, placards alert persons and emergency personnel to the potential dangers associated with the particular HazMat. HazMat placards must be at least 10.8 inches on each side and have a solid line inner border a half inch from the edge, be able to withstand a minimum of 30 days exposure to weather without deterioration, be square to point, clear and legible, and seen from all 4 sides. As a reminder, if and when you ever start to haul any fuel above 10% ethanol, which could be here in the near future, all compartments must be placarded on all sides. 2 compartments, 8 placards. An empty packaging containing only the residue of a HazMat shall be transported in the same manner as when it contained a greater quantity of that material. Bulk containers that are required to be marked when full must remain marked when empty until they have been purged of all residue and vapors. Placarding numbers for HazMat can be found on the table of the 172.504 regulation. And each person offering a motor carrier or hazardous material for transportation by highway shall provide the motor carrier with the required placards unless the vehicle is already placarded as required.
Please repeat your transmission. I can't copy you.
In the event of a spill or release of a hazardous material, always follow the procedures which have been outlined by your company. If you believe that lives or health are in danger, move to a safe location and call 911 to get help. Ensure your safety and those around you, and then safely identify the spilled material by checking either shipping papers, markings, labeling, and placardings, or the Emergency Response Guidebook. Emergency response information is required to be available at all times during transport and storage of HazMat. It should have basic description and the technical name of the hazardous material, immediate hazards of health, risks of fire or explosion, immediate precautions to take in an accident or incident, immediate methods for handling fires, initial steps for handling spills or leaks, and preliminary first aid measures. The emergency response information must be printed legibly in English, available for use away from the package containing the material, be presented on a shipping paper, MSDS, or emergency response guidebook, immediately available to drivers of motor vehicles transporting HazMat, and to facility personnel whenever HazMat is present. The Emergency Response Guidebook is a good reference for the initial emergency response steps to be taken in a HazMat incident. Once you've determined the shipping name or ID number, you can refer to one of 4 main sections in this guidebook to help you. Let's look at each section in the guidebook to see how. The yellow section allows you to reference the material by the identification number. By looking up the ID number, this section will then give the material and refer you to a guide page for emergency response information. For example, if you knew only that your material ID number was 1202, the yellow section would show that this number is for diesel fuel or fuel oil and reference you to guide page 128 for further information. The blue section allows you to reference the material by the name, for example, asbestos. There you will find the identification number as well as the guidebook page for further information. The orange section is where you'll find the guide pages referred to in both the blue and yellow sections, and the most important component of the Emergency Response Guidebook. Vital emergency response information can be found here for hazardous materials. In this section you will find detailed information on the potential hazards of fire or explosion or to health, details on personal protective equipment to be worn, as well as evacuation distances. Also we'll find emergency response information such as firefighting, how to handle a spill or leak, and first aid measures to take on victims. The green section is a table of initial isolation and protective action distances. This section is primarily used by fire departments and other emergency responders. Given the heightened specter of terrorism in our nation, security awareness is an important part of HazMat training. All HazMat employees must receive training that provides an awareness of the security risks associated with HazMat transport and methods to enhance HazMat transportation security. Your company is required to have a site-specific security plan in place to address potential employee, facility, and en-route security issues. More site-specific and duty-specific security training should be provided by your employer at least annually. Security plans are useful to help identify vulnerabilities through a risk management evaluation. We would look at identifying areas of concern, assembling a detailed information on system operations, identify control points where intervention can reduce risk, and being aware of the current Homeland Security threat assessment level, elevated threats, imminent threats, and taking the necessary precautions as stated in your plan. Things to consider under personnel security. Employees should report any suspicious activity. Implement routine security inspections. Only use internal communications to provide sensitive company information, and verify and cross-check any new hires. For facility security, review your security plan with local law enforcement. Ensure fence security and lock gates to sensitive areas. Proper lighting and surveillance cameras should be installed. Limit visitor access, and all trucks and tanks should be locked with keys in a secure area when not in use. For en route security, consider drivers need to be alert. Report any suspicious activity immediately. Trucks should be locked with windows up during transport and when parked. Be suspicious of timing and location of deliveries, and avoid conversation with strangers regarding content and location of the deliveries. And consider preferred routes. Avoid tunnels, bridges, and populated areas. For proper loading and unloading procedures, we'll first look at Class 3 flammable liquids. The general requirements for this class are found in the 177.834 regulation. Packages must be secured in vehicles. No smoking while loading or unloading. The handbrake must be set. And reasonable care must be taken to prevent undue rise in temperature of containers and their contents during transit. The attendance requirements for a Class 3 say that a motor carrier who transports hazardous materials by a cargo tank must ensure that the cargo tank is attended by a qualified person at all times during loading and unloading. Attends means alert and within 25 feet of the cargo tank. The person must have an unobstructed view of the tank and hose. And unless the engine of a cargo tank truck is to be used for operating a pump, no Class 3 materials should be loaded or unloaded from any cargo tank while the engine is running. The bonding and grounding requirements for non-cargo tanks say that containers not in metallic contact, metallic bonds, or ground conductors should be used. First, connect the electrical conductor to the container to be filled, and secondly, connect the conductor to the container from which the liquid is to come only. To avoid static electricity ignition, the second connection must be made at a point away from the discharge opening. For bonding and grounding of cargo tanks, when a cargo tank is loaded through an open filling hole, one end of a bond wire shall be connected to the stationary system piping or connected steel framing, and the other side to the shell of the cargo tank to provide a continuous electrical connection. When a cargo tank is loaded or unloaded through a vapor-tight top or bottom connection, bonding or grounding is not required. Let's now look at the proper loading and unloading for Class 2 gases. Under the general requirements operating procedures, each operator of a cargo tank vehicle transporting a liquefied compressed gas must carry on or within the vehicle written emergency discharge control procedures for delivery operation. Packages must also be secured in vehicles, no smoking while loading or unloading, preventing undue rise in temperature of containers and contents, and the handbrake must be set. Regulation 177.840 states that floors and platforms must be essentially flat. Cylinders containing gases must be secured to prevent overturning. They may be loaded into appropriate racks if they are able to adequately secure the cylinders in place. They shall not be loaded onto any part of the floor or platform of any vehicle which is not essentially flat, and any cylinders marked DOT-4L must be loaded in an upright position and securely braced. Portable tank containers must be loaded on a flat floor or platform or onto a suitable frame. Containers shall be securely block tied down to prevent movement even during sudden stops and starts. For loading and unloading of flammable gases, no flammable gas may be loaded or unloaded from any cargo tank with the engine running unless it's used for the operation of the transfer pump, and each liquefied discharge valve on a cargo tank other than the engine fuel line valve must be closed during transport. Under Class 2 gases, cargo tank safety checks are required per the 177.840 regulation. Before unloading from a cargo tank truck containing a liquefied compressed gas, the components of the discharge system, including hose assemblies and piping, must be checked for defects and ensure they are in good condition. To further inspect rejection criteria for hoses, go to the 180.416G regulation, and for piping system rejection criteria, the 180.416-2. Emergency shutdown requirements are found in the 177.840P. In the case of a release of product into the environment during the unloading of liquefied compressed gas, the qualified person must shut the internal self-closing stop valve or other primary means of closure and shut down all power equipment. The procedures for unloading liquefied petroleum gas from a cargo tank in metered delivery service is listed here. Attendant must remain within 150 feet of the cargo tank and 25 feet of the delivery hose. Must observe both the cargo tank and receiving container once every 5 minutes when the stop valve is open. Cargo tanks using a facility-provided delivery hose, the attendant must remain within arm's reach of the mechanical means of closure of the internal stop valve or other means of closure except for short durations to activate controls or monitor the receiving container. For non-meter delivery service, an attendant must remain within 25 feet of the cargo tank when the internal self-closing stop valve is open. It must have an unobstructed view of the cargo tank and hose to the maximum extent possible, except when necessary to activate controls or monitor the receiving container. The discharge system inspection requirements are shown below. Each delivery, prior to unloading, the operator must visually examine the hose and assembly for defects. Daily, the operator must test the remote shutoff device, if one is equipped to the vehicle. Monthly, the driver must activate the on-truck remote shutdown system, otherwise known as the creep test. This test must be documented the first week of each month and recorded on the monthly cargo tank inspection form. Monthly, the operator must visually inspect the cargo tank's piping system, including bolts, connections, and seals, and check the internal self-closing stop valve for leakage. And yearly, a registered inspector must inspect the delivery hose assembly and piping system. Non-bulk quantities are a capacity of 119 gallons or less of a liquid, a water capacity of 1,000 pounds or less when it is to be used for Class II materials, and a net mass of 882 pounds or less and a capacity of 119 gallons or less of a solid. The different types of non-bulk packages include drums, cylinders, boxes, fiber drums, bottles, and bags. And except as specifically noted in the code, an empty package containing only the residue of a hazmat should be transported in the same manner as when it contained a greater quantity of that hazmat. The marking requirements for shippers of non-bulk packages states that each person who offers a hazardous material for transport shall mark each package, freight container, and transport vehicle containing the hazardous material in the manner required by law. It shall be marked by the shipper using the hazmat table and include the proper shipping name and ID number preceded by UN or NA. Carrier is responsible to be sure the shipper has done this prior to shipment. The carrier will be held responsible for what he or she hauls. Markings must include the technical names as part of the shipping name if required by column 1 of the hazmat table, where a G would appear. It will also contain the name of the hazardous substance contained in the RQ if the name of the material isn't included in the proper shipping name. And outside of each package authorized by an exemption shall be plainly and durably marked DOT-E, followed by the exemption number. Labeling requirements for non-bulk packaging says that labels must include the ID numbers from column 4 of the hazmat table. Required to be placed near the proper shipping name on the package. Must be durable and resistant to the elements. And when more than one label is required, labels should be within 6 inches of each other. And no person may offer for transport, and no carrier may transport a package with a hazmat label unless the package contains that hazard material. Only one of each required label should be attached to a package, and labels are not to be placed in the bottom of a package. It's illegal to transport any package which by its color, design, or shape could be confused with or conflict with the label prescribed by the regulations. Let's look briefly at the segregation of hazardous materials. The section applies to materials which meet one or more of the DOT hazard classes and are in packages which require labels in accordance with Part 172, in a compartment within a multi-compartmented cargo tank, in a portable tank loaded in a transport vehicle or freight container. Hazmat may not be loaded, transported, or stored together in accordance with the segregation table for hazardous materials. So here's how the segregation table works. You'll see the class or divisions along the left in the top. If you see no hazard class or division or a blank space, that indicates no restrictions apply. If you see an X, these materials may not be loaded, transported, or stored together in the same vehicle or facility during transport. An O, these materials may not be loaded or transported or stored together unless separated, so that during leakage, products cannot come in contact with one another. An asterisk indicates that segregation among different Class 1 materials is governed by the compatibility table in 177.848. For highway transportation, only drivers trained in the requirements of 49 CFR can operate a hazmat vehicle. You're also required to obtain a hazmat endorsement on their driver's license. When transporting shipments of hazardous materials, the driver must check the shipment is correctly marked, labeled, and identified by the shipper, refuse any leaking packages, attach required placarding, follow all laws and regulations, keep hazardous material shipping papers and emergency response information easily accessible in transport, and report any accidents or incidents involving hazmat as quickly as possible to the carrier. A vehicle inspection report is required to be filled out at the end of each shift. Be sure to note any vehicle issues and date, and also be sure to sign the form. One copy should be kept in your company's file for 3 months, and one copy kept in the vehicle until the next shift. The next driver of that vehicle must verify and sign off that any vehicle maintenance issues discovered on the prior shift were repaired. Other HazMat highway transportation items we need to address include parking, which is found in the 397.7. Motor vehicles containing HazMat other than Divisions 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 explosives must not park on or within 5 feet of the traveled portion of a public street or highway, except for brief periods when the necessities of operation require the vehicle to be parked and there is no other practical place to park. For vehicles which are stopped, drivers transporting HazMat are required to follow specified procedures when stopped on a highway or shoulder for any reason other than normal traffic stops. Drivers must display the hazard warning signal flashers when stopped for other than normal traffic stops. Flashers must remain displayed until warning devices are set out. Warning devices must be placed as soon as possible, but no later than 10 minutes in the following manner. 1 on the traffic side of and 10 feet from the stopped vehicle in the direction of approaching traffic, and 1 at 100 feet from the stopped vehicle in the center of the traffic lane or shoulder occupied by the vehicle in the direction of the approaching traffic and away from the approaching traffic. The regulations for smoking say that no person shall smoke within 25 feet of a vehicle containing Class 1, 5, 3, Division 4.1 and 4.2, or any tank vehicle placarded for Class 3 or Division 2.1 materials, and no smoking within 25 feet of an empty tank motor vehicle which was used to transport Class 3 flammables or Division 2.1. The regulations for routing are found in the 397.67. It says that placarded vehicles shall avoid heavily populated areas, crowds, tunnels, narrow streets, and alleys. Our last section for highway transportation is railroad crossings. Any placarded vehicle and any vehicle carrying any quantity of Division 2.3 chlorine must stop within 50 feet and not closer than 15 feet to the railroad tracks. After determining that no train is approaching, the driver may proceed in a gear that allows the vehicle to complete the crossing without changing gears. HazMat training is an integral part of working in the transportation industry. This training covered a lot of territory, but hopefully you're now better equipped to recognize and identify hazardous materials in your workplace, wherever and whomever you are, as well as the general regulations and preventative measures to help keep yourself and others safe. Thanks for watching.